here in North America. Our young sister who was in Ottawa talked about her involvement in an organization called the Congress of Aboriginal People and Patrick Brazeau. And I became a national leader right after Patrick Brazeau. His corruption fell on my lap. His financial corruption fell on my lap, and I had to deal with it. And I was beginning to try to figure out the financial mismanagement that was going on with the Congress of Aboriginal People as a national leader, and to deal with the money problems that this national organization, who's claiming to represent all of the off-reserve Indian people in this country, and the hundreds of thousands of dollars that this national leader allocated to other leaders throughout the country in order to keep him elected, in order to keep him at a position in which federal government under Stephen Harper would then appoint him to become a senator in order for him to begin attacking all of our chiefs in this country. That's the kind of corruption that I had to deal with and follow and try to deal with. And I did not know how to deal with that kind of corruption. I had to go back into a spiritual realm in order for me to be able to combat what I was facing as a national leader. And I had that opportunity to combat that corruption when the first time in history that an Indian leader is invited to the Red Chambers, or the Senate of Canada, as you all know it. I was one of those leaders that was invited to the Red Chambers to address the senators in June of 2009. And at that particular time, in 2009, in the Senate, is when Pamela Wallace of Saskatchewan was already issuing herself monies that wasn't allowed for her to take. So that corruption within the Red Chambers started at the time when I began to address the senators as one of the national leaders. And one of the other national leaders that was sitting in the chambers, the Red Chamber, was Phil Fontaine. This is Phil Fontaine right here. And of course, a picture of me and Phil. As you can see, Phil looking very, very disturbed. He was being attacked by Patrick Brazeau, who was the senator at the time. And while I was giving a speech to all the senators within the Red Chambers, and I want to share that speech so that you all understand the power of prayer that we need to get back to, that we need to really fully understand the powers of what we can do as Indian people to tackle these institutions, these legalized institutions that are nothing more than legalized mafias, legalized mafiosos. These people are here to destroy us, and they're doing a damn good job. Because I've seen it firsthand as a national leader in Ottawa. I had to live it, I had to see it, and either I could be part of it and become part of that corruption, or I walk away from it. I chose to walk away from a $250,000 salary. I spent 1 year within Ottawa trying to understand the politics of Indian peoples in Ottawa, including National Chief at Leo, Phil Fontaine, who was the chief at the time. And I had to understand these people. I had to understand how they work, how they thought. And I didn't like it. I hated it. And I want to share that moment when I got up to stand up to the senators and tell them these very words. Good afternoon, senators, elders, residential school survivors, and fellow national Aboriginal leaders. I welcome the opportunity to be here today on unceded territory of the Algonquin peoples to speak to the Committee of the whole of the Canadian Senate on progress made and commitments following the apology to former students of Indian residential schools. I wish to honor the resilience and courage of the residential school survivors and recognize their ongoing healing efforts and determination to seek the truth. Of all the stories of abuses that have been inflicted upon my people, one story stands out in my mind, and it is the story of White Bear Woman Standing, how she was brutally beaten for speaking her language and placed in a coma for 5 months. And it was by the will of the Great Spirit that she survived and was able to live a long life. And it was by the will of the Great Spirit that she survived a stroke to see her first residential school payment as an elder. And it was by the will of the Great Spirit that I hold in my hand her eagle fan to fan you spiritually. And personally, I will pray in hopes that the federal government releases all its promises and owing to our people. And it is by the will of the Great Spirit that I am sitting here today addressing you, because White Bear Woman Standing is my mother. And if White Bear Woman Standing perished that day at the residential school she attended, I, as a national leader, would not be here today. And I thank the Great Spirit for allowing me to live to see this day. And this day will be remembered by my children, my grandchildren, and my great-grandchildren. On this day, June 11, 2009. And when I prayed that eagle fan within the red chamber, within the Senate, I asked the Creator to release all the corruption that exists in this room. And when I left that chamber and I saw the fighting that went on between Patrick Brazeau and Phil Fontaine, and I left with my head held high, wearing my dog soldier outfit, and leaving the red chambers and looking behind me and seeing all the evil, the corruption that was inside the red chambers, and leaving it, I said, there, I've done my job, I'm leaving. I never went back to Ottawa, and after I left, that is when the Senate scandal broke out. If Elijah Harper can wave his feather and stop me slave court, and give a prayer to stop me slave court like he did here in the Manitoba legislature, I too can wave my mother's eagle fan and stop the corruption that's going on in Ottawa, especially in the Senate of this country. That's the corruption that we have to deal with. And that is where our spirituality is very, very important in fighting the evil and the corruptions and the money scandals that are going on in this country. Because once we are sincere in our prayers, in our way of life, of reestablishing our spiritual connection to the land, we have to go back to the land. We need that sacred fire again. We need to sit by that sacred fire. We need to go back to the land. To this very day, right at this very moment, I no longer have a bank account. I no longer have a job. I no longer have any of the luxuries that chiefs and councils in this country all have. Because I have chosen to go back to the land. I have chosen to stand up and go with my heart, because my heart is with my people. Our people. Each and every one of you that are living right across Canada, next to these pipelines, where I am living, I am going to take a stand. I will take a stand. I will be going back to the last mountain and the last mountain lake, the homeland of my people. And I will go there and I will take a stand, and I invite each and every one of you to come with me and to take a stand alongside me and my ancestors. Because if my ancestors can come back from the grave and stop that pipeline at the Food Saskatchewan, which happened just not more than 3 months ago, that tells me a lot. That tells me that our spirituality is there. It tells me that our ancestors are there, and that they're prepared to take up the challenge. They're prepared to back us up spiritually. We have to go back to the land. We have to take a stand. And I'm with each and every one of you 100%. Go ahead.